So, Jagdish, I met occasionally at Columbia, just usual pleasantries, nothing much. But he comes out as a wonderful human being. I want to say that. He was, as Padma says, perennially happy, congenitally happy. I wish I could be like that. And the 75th birthday celebration party she had for Padma, I think that's something every husband should try and emulate. That was very Jagdish, that shows your real nature, your real spirit, and your real support to Padma when she needs it. Because after all, it's not a question of just a party. It's a gesture, it's a thought that one most dear to you is with you and your friends are with you. And that's, I think, the message of the book, that you can with spirit and fortitude overcome odds. I find that, Padma, you're happy about Obama's election.
Very happy.
That's right. We share that. And, and that's the thing, whatever the odds, you can do it, and you can do it without bitterness, without a sense of pathos and sense of any vanity about it. And that's what you've done in the book, and which is a definite read. And frankly, I was making notes, says, my junior in the chambers took the book away, I got it only at 4:30. So next time we're going to keep it at a place where no one can take it away. And with these few words, I want to thank you for a very good contribution you've done. It's been an inspiration for people in similar circumstances. It's been inspiration for others, their friends, and their husbands, to stand by people when they're in need of support. And that support goes a long way in one's fight to overcome the odds. Thank you very much. And the publisher ought to be thanked. Pictures are quite good. And on the whole, it's a book worth keeping and worth treasuring. Thank you.
To Mrs. Desai, Honorable Chief Minister, fellow panelists, and distinguished guests. When Mr. Singh invited me to this panel, he sent me a copy of the book. And he said, Meera, it would be very, very hard to put down. And it is true. This is a book which lingers with you for a long time. It's hard to put down physically, but it's also a book that doesn't leave your memories easily. And I will speak about this book from the perspective of a woman one generation after Ms. Desai. And there are now many senior women in corporate world today, and certainly in banking. And I'm often asked, why are there so many senior women in India? How is it that you have broken through the glass ceiling? And the truth is that our generation actually never had to break through the glass ceiling. That was done for us by this generation who went before us. Women like Ms. Desai, women like Ms. Dikshit, women like Tarjani Vakil, who had to battle the stereotypes and to prove that it is possible to be feminine, to be a woman, to be a mother, to be a homemaker, to be a successful professional. And I found that this is actually not necessarily so easy in many other parts of the world. So if you look at continental Europe, to have senior women in the corporate world is much more difficult. And I think our generation owes a debt of gratitude to these ladies. So firstly, thank you very much. The second is, as Mr. Dikshit said, when I read the book, I had a sense of feeling very much like it was a familiar story. And there are many similarities in our life, ma'am. What is common between us is our association with the Soviet Union. So I think you got to know the Soviet Union through your love for and your knowledge of Russian. I got to know Russian through my association with the Soviet Union. My father was a naval officer and he was posted in the Soviet Union in the last years of the Brezhnev era. And I spent a year in a small town in Georgia. And like you, I then started studying Russian from Nina Potapova, which I think is the definitive text for Russian language. But I studied it through the eyes of the Russians at that point in time in the Soviet Union. And though I wasn't then a student of economics, it was in my first year of college in Sydenham College, which you know well. I was studying my economics by correspondence and I was studying my Russian by practice. And I learned a lot about the infirmities of the Soviet state by living there. One of my defining memories was standing in a queue. Every time you went anywhere and you saw a queue, you joined it, because everything was in short supply. So you felt, I'll get something of value at the end of it. And I was standing there with my mother, and as we reached the head of the queue, we found they were selling baby shoes. So of course we had no use for that. When, since we'd stood in the queue for about 45 minutes, we were ready to leave. And a lady behind said, no, you should take these shoes. And I said, what will we do with them? And she said, well, someone will need it. So just take it and you can give it away to someone. And it was an unforgettable lesson in what can happen in a socialist state and how not having free markets really changes and distorts perspectives. So I learned my economics on the floor in the Soviet Union. When I returned, I then did my Russian diploma, and like you, I studied my Russian declensions in a BEST bus, so not in Delhi but in Bombay, riding from Kulaba to the House of Soviet Culture. So in many ways, I think the story will ring true with many of us. And I do believe a lot of us have studied abroad. Like yourself, I went on a scholarship almost 30 years later to France. And like you, I felt odd as an Indian in Europe, and I felt when I came back, not quite Indian back in India. And many people will identify with that sense of neither belonging here nor there, but this is a global world. And I think we all learn through these experiences really how to be global citizens. For me, the most touching bit in the book is when you talk about your daughter, Anuradha. And I think for every mother in this audience, we reach our true potential through the eyes of our daughters. We learn through them. And when you describe your daughter as a golden flower, that to me was the most touching part of your book. So thank you very much for a truly wonderful memoir, which I will carry with me for a long time. Thank you.
To be here and to be part of this process of celebrating perhaps one of the most candid autobiographies that anybody could have written. Frankly speaking, Padma, I'll take the liberty of to some extent being as candid as you have been in this book, and to confess that I was your student. I was also Jagdish's student, and many of us, which Professor Andhra Bethe, who was also teaching and who is here today in the audience, know how many of us, Padma, were fascinated by not only your academic brilliance, but fascinated by your really very, very attractive looks. Who would have really, many of us, like me, Padma, unsuccessfully tried to be very friendly to you. We did not realize at that time, Padma, that Jagdish was very keenly involved with you. We did joke, and I don't know where Professor Andhra Bethe would bear this out, that there were several other very daunting people at that time, some of whom are no more, who were equally fascinated by you, Padma. I will not take their names because they are not with us anymore. But so I think that, one must really admire who, looking at this photograph of yours, Padma, sitting in the snow outside the Literature Center of Economics Department, Harvard, in 1957, would not fail to be so greatly attracted by what you represented, the devastating combination of brilliance and good looks, which I think that is a very rare combination to really have. I think your book is candid. It is full of personal details, which I think would require a degree of audaciousness not many of us would credit ourselves into having. It contains many fascinating things which brought back memories of Delhi University days and the Delhi School of Economics, including the fact, Padma, how to keep yourself more purposefully engaged. You pursued a serious course in the Agra and the Jaipur Atroli Gharana of music, and how you really took a long journey to be with the Ustad to learn this. Since then, Indian classical music has also been a passion with me, and it was a passion with many of us who at that time were pursuing economics at the Delhi University. Your chapter on the Delhi School of Economics did bring, Padma, very vivid memories of reliving times which have gone back. None of us would have at that time realized, being your student, because you taught with great precision. In fact, Jagdish now and then broke and had his own sense of humor. But Padma, you were rather serious in everything which you did, in not only pursuit of music, pursuit of economics, but in the rigor with which you taught economics to many of us who were quite fascinated with you. None of us realized the past which you had undergone. We never realized Jagdish's strong commitment, which comes through so wonderfully when the cook who left you and initially saw Jagdish really remarked that he would take good care of you. None of us realized at that time, or would have realized, what this actually meant. And I think that, Meera, you have been complimentary, that the generation of Padma perhaps ushered the stage when I think that this new generation are freer from the kind of social bondage and the kind of ceilings with middle-class attitudes in Gujarat. I would say, imagine it would be middle-class attitudes which would be prevalent in many other parts of India beyond Gujarat. I don't know how much things have changed. I don't know, since I now belong to a different generation. I would accept, Meera, your word that it has changed. But I think many of us would realize that, and sociologists like who studies social attitudes more closely, like Andre, would say more clearly of whether and how much they have changed and how much these contradictions are getting resolved. Most people who undergo these contradictions succumb to these contradictions. You did not, Padma. You did not succumb to the contradictions. You fought against this. And not conversion was inadequate, because you did invoke a very special act, even after your conversion, to be able to secure the kind of emancipation from that terrible bondage with which you have been put to. So I think that all of us must celebrate this book. We must celebrate it because hopefully this will kindle similar thoughts on others who have undergone this trauma, few successfully, most going down. One way of putting this in public domain is to encourage, Padma, for more people to write with the degree of candor, figure, of personal details, to be able to really describe how much stratified society, what it can do to smother what could be budding geniuses like you. I have no knowledge of Russian economics, Meera, and of course Padma is a very celebrated name in comparative economics, particularly of the Central European countries. She's also, of course, and Jagdish, I don't know whether you would like to yourself speak on that, because while in the various emails which you exchanged, you did want us to also refer to some of Padma's other contribution to the rich domain of economic literature. And I think that not many of us, for instance, can forget that very recently she wrote that book, Financial Crisis, Contagion and Containment, From Asia to Argentina, which was published by the Princeton University Press in 2011 as a successor to her volume, From Financial Crisis to Global Recovery. And this latter book of yours chronicles the kind of events which led to the global financial meltdown. You have described in that book that this particular one is not episodic, But this particular book, the second book, is really designed as a textbook for students to understand the origins of financial crisis. I did try to seek some comparisons between the book of Raghuram Rajan on the fault line and this particular one on the prognosis of what led to the global financial meltdown and the path ahead. I'll not go into that, but I think that Padma, you should be encouraged, having written this outstanding autobiography, now that you will have some free time, to write a successor volume to this particular one on the financial crisis, contagion and containment, because I think that the final answers